Today is day 9, and in this video, we're not going to be exploring design, development, or anything to do with Power BI desktop. In this short video, we're going to be more leaning on a Power BI governance or setup discussion that I regularly have, and it's all to do with what I like to call the framework. So, in other words, the workspaces, the apps, org apps, which is something more recent that came into Power BI or Fabric, I should say, right? So here's the thing. When we think about Power BI, our minds usually go straight to design and development, launching Power BI desktop, but we should also put the relevant amount of time in thinking, how do we set up the framework? How many workspaces should we have? Who can publish to the workspace? What types of permissions should we offer them, right? What is the security around the workspaces, the apps, the org apps, the audiences? What about self-service, right? Because maybe we don't just have a core centralized team that does all the reporting and development and everyone else is an end user. Maybe we have parts or the entire organization that does some form of self-service. Do they freely access the same workspaces and apps as the core reporting team? And it goes beyond that. Do we set up a dev UAT and prod for all the workspaces? Do we have some sort of medallion architecture and so much more, right? But the point is this, we need to plan for scalability, governance, and overall success. But in this video, out of all of that, we are going to be focusing in on workspaces versus apps, and then I'll give a bit of an overview of org apps, right? So starting off with workspaces, everyone. I want us to think of workspaces as test or dev environments. In other words, users from the organization should not have access. If they are to consume artifacts such as reports or dashboards, that's when we move into Power BI apps, right? So think of your workspaces as a pre-production area for development and for testing purposes. Only those individuals should really have access here as well. By the way, in the workspace, you can store various different artifacts. And now with Microsoft Fabric, Workspaces has expanded and can include all the other sort of artifacts that were previously in the other experiences as well. But also I want to call out, in Workspaces, you can create folders, right? Many people usually think, oh, great, we will create folders in Workspaces and then assign different artifacts, reports in here and give different security permissions, but that's not how it works. Folders in Workspaces are purely for organization purposes. It's to organize reports, dashboards, semantic models, and various other items. That way developers and testers can easily find them and locate them. But that's a workspace. In a nutshell, use it for testing and development purposes to share within your team. We then move to Power BI Workspace apps. They've now adopted this name because of org apps, but many people, such as myself, just call them Power BI apps, right? So think of a Power BI app as the go-to place for your end users. In other words, the individuals, stakeholder groups in the organization that just want to consume the data, the reports, the dashboards, nothing else, right? And the reason I really like Workspace apps or Power BI apps is because you can also align them to your organizational branding. Another big pull-in factor is it removes all the jargon and the clickable links and different types of buttons for deployment pipelines or create new items. I mean, think about it. If you're an individual from the business and you don't care about anything else apart from consuming the report, you wouldn't want all this noise surrounding your reports, and it just makes it overly confusing. Hence, apps are the go-to place for end users. The other thing as well worth calling out is it's a one-to-one relationship between a workspace and a workspace app, right? Always was. However, we have had something called audiences that was introduced within apps. So what does that mean? Imagine you have a finance workspace. Previously, you would have one finance workspace and one app. Now, within finance, you would have the execs, you would have maybe financial planning and analytics, you would have the analysts, and you have various other groups. What was very frustrating was you could start off with a finance app, but then very quickly, what if the execs and the analysts wanted to have separate environments? In other words, the execs don't want the analysts to see their specific reports. Well, we was forced to go down the path of now not only having one finance workspace, but to actually maybe create a finance everyone workspace, a finance exec workspace for reports that are exclusive to the execs, and also a finance analyst workspace that was exclusive only to their reports who no one else should have access to as well. So you can see how quickly things can get messy. With audiences, you keep one finance workspace, one app, but within the app, through audiences, you can split up or offer more granular access to the different individuals. So you can create a different audience for the execs and the analysts as well. The other thing worth calling out as well that I really like with apps is whenever your development or people carrying out any testing are working in the workspace, it does not affect the app. You have to go in and click update app in order for the changes from the workspace to get promoted to the app. Hence, I like to see it as a real production space for your end users as well. So if you need to share with a large group of individuals across the organization to consume reports, apps is the go-to place. And by the way, look, sometimes I work with organizations that are a lot smaller, right? And look, if you have maybe 5 to 10 people that just need to consume a report more on an informal basis, that's fine. Use a workspace. But when you go over that, really the best practice is to use apps as well. Now, before we move on though, here's the thing. There's something now called org apps. This does only come with Fabric, by the way. You don't have this as part of Pro or PPU, I think, as well, right? Now, what is the key difference between Workspace apps and org apps? The key difference is this. With Workspace apps, it's still a one-to-one relationship with a workspace, right? However, what we can do now, one workspace can have multiple org apps. That is the key difference, right? But with that said, the way they also work is a tad different from Workspace apps. So just keep that in mind. But I just want you to know that that does exist, but it's still in preview mode. I will be releasing a more full video on the difference. Now, to finish up here, a common question I regularly get is, Laz, how should we split up workspaces and apps? And really, these are the three options. You can split it up by subject area or analysis or project, and you have your pros and cons, right? The other one, the most common one, is by department or team. Previously, I found this not to be the best approach for the example I gave earlier, right? You have finance, but then within finance, you have different sub areas that need their own environments, but it has become easier now with audiences and maybe even more not so with org apps. And then lastly, you can do it per report, but I'll be honest, this is the one I'd recommend to stay completely away of, because if you do one workspace per report, I mean, yeah, you just have a complete proliferation of workspaces everywhere afterwards, right? So hopefully you enjoyed that video. The takeaway here is please put some thought, some effort into understanding how should we structure the Power BI framework, the workspaces, the apps, the audience, the security surrounding this, and how people can interact with all these elements as well. So look forward to seeing you in the next video.